Hi, I'm Whitney.
And I'm Camden. Welcome to Ghosts and Garnets, Murder in Idaho.
You guys, the story we have for you today, I should have looked up synonyms for douchebag because I feel like I'm going to be saying douchebag so many times in this episode, and I should come up with like another way to describe this man.
You know what's great is that we're on our computers right now, so you could still Google synonyms.
I know, but then you make fun of me for my clickety-clacketing.
Well, because it sounds like cartoon cats typing, but just do it.
Synonyms for douche.
It's going to be like...
Jagoff. Knave.
Knave?
All right, well, I'm just going to keep this up, and I will reference it as needed.
That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. Guys, this is how the magic is made.
This is how the magic is made.
The story we are going to tell you today is about the unenviable title of the very first person in the entire state of Idaho to be sentenced to death 2 different times for unrelated murders. And man, is this guy a real miscreant.
Good job! Whitney's using her words.
My script says douchebag, but I did reference my list. Yeah, this guy is a real piece of work. And he's one of those people that truly has no sense at all of how the rest of the world sees him. He is living in a land of make-believe where he is this magical unicorn man that women love.
He's delusional. Yes.
He's out of his mind.
However, did you look at pictures of him?
Yes. Are we going to talk about the fact that he's attractive?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. This idiot. What a waste.
Guys, we are not Ted Bundy-ettes, okay? We are not the girls that think that murderers are hot. He just happens to be an attractive man. And most of the stories we tell, these men, their outsides look like their insides. And this guy looks like a frat dude from 1996. He's very clean cut.
Mm-hmm. Young, dark hair.
He doesn't look like who he is.
A murderer. He's a cutie patootie. All right.
We like bad boys, but not that bad.
Not that bad at all. No, thank you.
No, I draw the line. Meanwhile, we're married to like the nicest, sweetest men on the planet.
Don't get crazy, Whitney. They're going to hear this and get giant heads.
Russ knows he's nice. Everyone knows he's nice.
Yeah, this is a true story. He's a saint, baby. He married you.
Whenever I complain to my mom about something that he's done, I can just see it in her eyes. She's like, don't fuck this up, Whitney.
Yes. 100%. 100%, Nancy. I'm with you. All right, so to begin the story, we're going to start at the end. I found an article from IdahoPress.com that was sort of a labor of love for the author, John Barry. And in it, he details the strange coincidences and unlikely relationship tying him to convicted murderer Erick Virgil Hall. So he starts out this article with how they met, and he asks Mr. Hall, "Do you remember the house on 13th Street?" "I do remember that house," Hall replied in his letter back to Barry. The house they are referring to was owned by a man named Grant Bernhardt, an elderly man who turned his home into sort of a halfway house for the homeless to crash on his couch for the night or live in his basement for as long as they needed. Turns out Barry himself was one of those seeking a place to stay off the streets in 2003, and where he was living when Hall was finally arrested. When the two men saw him on the news, Grant told him he used to stay here. Hall didn't stay at the halfway house for long, but he had slept on the same stained basement mattress as Barry. Happily, Barry's life turned around. He got married and went back to school. The same could not be said for Mr. Hall. In letters exchanged between Barry and Hall, Erick avoids talking about the night he murdered Henneman. To be honest with you, he wrote, I don't remember that day the way they said it went down. I was offended that everyone sees me as someone undesirable. He resents the media portrayal of him as a transient. He said, while he had been homeless at one point, he had a place in 2000 and claims to have been working odd jobs for Barrett Business Services. He said, quote, they wanted to portray me as some vile, evil creature. That is not the case. I had and still have several women, normal women, who know and love me. I was involved with several of them sexually. That's what I do for fun. I date women. Some were married, some had children, a few were the church types. I love women, and I can tell you there were many who loved me back. I'm not tooting my own horn, not flexible enough. End quote. He ended that sentence with a smiley face emoji. Ew. Gross. Several of them sexually.
Gross.
No. Have some dignity.
I'm sorry. I do not enjoy jokes about being flexible.
Enough to
and
toot your own
tooting
horn.
one's own horn.
Same.
Okay? Prison humor is not going to get you anywhere here, Erick Hall.
I don't think it gets you anywhere in prison either.
I don't know.
Well, maybe.
That's super highbrow humor over there. So we are going to pivot and talk about the women of this story. Erick Hall's first victim, as Cam talked about a little earlier, was a woman named Lynn Henneman. Lynn's parents, Mickey and Ron, were originally from Chicago and settled in Bozeman, Montana when she was 10 years old. She graduated from Park Senior High School in nearby Livingston, where she met her first husband, John Henneman, before attending Montana State University. Lynn and John divorced in 1994 after 11 years of marriage and remained good friends. She wanted something more than Bozeman could offer her, her ex-husband said. She always dreamed of being a flight attendant. That's all she ever wanted to do. She left Bozeman for Boston and waited tables until she could get into flight attendant school. In 1995, Lynn's dream came true and she joined TWA, switching to United Airlines just 3 years before her death. On September 24th, 2000, Lynn awoke at 3 a.m., got dressed, careful not to wake her still sleeping brand new husband, Walter. They had just gotten married 3 weeks previously. She loaded her suitcase into the car and began her 2-hour drive to LaGuardia Airport. She had one last flight to work before she and Walter left for their honeymoon in Bali. Her mom later told the Bozeman Daily Chronicle that she thought about using her sick time to get out of working, but the same reliability that had allowed her to accrue so much sick time stopped her from ducking out of her responsibility. She parked her car in the garage, made her way to the plane, and 7 hours later landed in Boise, Idaho. Henneman had made this trip before, several times in fact, and she liked the small western town.
Western.
Little did she know, this time would be different. She was unaware of the girls that had died in Boise over the last 2 years. 22-year-old Kay Lynn Jackson, raped and stabbed on her way to church not far from the hotel Lynn was staying in, or Cassandra Yeager, found the summer before at Lucky Peak Reservoir, killed by a single bullet, or Samantha Mayer, a BSU student who also met her death on the scenic bike path that ran the length of the Boise River. But even if she had known, it wouldn't have deterred her. Her husband told the New York Post she walked the streets of LA, Rome, and New York without incident. Yet there was something that led her to call her mom the day before, expressing worry and even uncharacteristically suggesting that Walter might join her this time. They chalked it up to her being anxious to get to her honeymoon. The flight crew arrived at the Doubletree Riverside, and after they were all checked in, they made a plan to meet in the lobby at 7:15 the next morning to head back. Now, Lynn loved art. Part of what had drawn her to Walter was that he was a painter, and each trip to Boise included a stop at the Boise Art Museum. She spent most of the afternoon there and just before closing time slipped into the gift shop. She had 6 nieces and nephews back home who she was close with, ranging from 4 to 13 years old, and she wanted to buy them gifts, glitter pens, window paint, and a book of brain teasers. The sun was almost gone when she crossed the street to Table Rock Pub and Grill and ordered a spinach salad with mango chutney dressing. It was a salad she'd had on her first trip to Boise and every time since, and she'd become obsessed with the idea of recreating it for Walter. After dinner, she crossed 9th Street and headed down onto the north side of the Greenbelt in the opposite direction she had traveled earlier. Lynn was almost to Americana Boulevard when a man on a bike stopped to talk to her. His name was Christian Johnson. She'd given him a friendly smile, and now he was hitting on her. She showed him her ring, and he apologized for flirting with a married woman before moving on. The Main Street Bridge was just over 3,000 feet, about half a mile, from her room at the Doubletree Hotel. For reasons still unknown, Lynn didn't head back to the hotel at this time. She kept walking and ventured into Garden City. Back in her room, the phone rang. It was Walter, who would continue to call her room throughout the night. And for those of you guys who aren't familiar with Boise, Boise's in a valley, and the Boise River, which is a pretty big river, and it runs all the way through Boise, all the way past Boise, and there is a path on both sides of the river. It goes for, I think, 14 miles on either side, and it's called the Greenbelt, and people walk and ride their bikes and, all kinds of stuff on it, and it will take you kind of anywhere you want to go through Boise. You can cross at multiple points. There's 20 different bridges from beginning to end, and it'll take you all the way through Boise into Garden City and past. So lots of people travel this way, especially out of town people, because it's very easy to get from one place to another by just following this Greenbelt.
That was far that she walked, though.
It's not as far as you think.
I guess maybe when it says I know, because I can picture the way that she would have walked. Mm-hmm. But when you say that she got to Garden City, it's like...
I think it's like maybe 2 miles. It's like...
Yeah, probably true.
It is interesting. For somebody who was... I guess she was from Montana, but she lived in New York and she had traveled all over the world. Walking... the Greenbelt's not super well lit.
At all.
Walking
especially
at
then.
night by yourself is... And I'm not at all victim blaming here, but because Boise is a relatively safe place, but it's
scary.
I wouldn't run on it even in the evening or at night. And
no.
I know my way around.
Later that night, on the corner of 49th and Bradley Streets, Lynn stopped and asked 2 women, Lisa Lewis and Peggy Hill, for directions back to the Doubletree. A man, Pat Hoffert, pulled up in his truck and offered to help, and soon they were joined by another man on a bike. Erick Virgil Hall. Erick told Lynn how to get back on the Greenbelt, telling her it would be the quickest way back to her hotel. Lynn left, and the group disbanded, but Lewis would later tell police that Erick rode off in the same direction he'd just sent Lynn. Walter, Lynn's husband, recalled during this time he felt so helpless. He said he would call and call and call again. At a certain point, he had to make himself stop calling her room. It was 2 a.m., and he kind of made up a story in his mind about what might have happened, but he couldn't sleep. He said he tried watching TV, but he finally shut that off around 4 a.m. And then when the phone rang at 10:15 a.m., Walter thought that it would be Lynn, but it was her supervisor telling him Lynn did not show up for check-in and was nowhere to be found. Walter immediately flew to Boise, and when he arrived, he was met by the Boise City Police Chief, and within a day, he was joined by Lynn's parents, Ron and Mickey, her brother Mark, her sister, Laura, and their spouses. The family scoured Boise, talked to police and the FBI, put up posters, and held press conferences. Mickey, Lynn's mother, said that Lynn hadn't really wanted to go on this trip. She was quoted as saying she said on the phone she had a bad feeling about it. A few days later, her wallet and its contents were discovered 8 miles from the hotel by some children playing in a field near a junior high school. Then that was it for 10 days. Nothing. Until on Saturday, October 7th, a fisherman discovered her body trapped under a log in the Boise River, more than a mile downstream from her hotel. The black sweater she had been wearing was tied tightly around her neck, and her shirt was tied around one of her wrists. Oral, vaginal, and anal swabs were collected from her body and sent for DNA testing. Cause of death was determined to be strangulation. Several days after the recovery of her body, more items belonging to Miss Henneman were found on the riverbank near the hotel. According to forensics, Lynn hadn't fought her attacker, but she lived through all of it. She lived through it as her clothes were torn off of her and her arms were being tied. Her attacker pulled so hard he broke her left arm. She lived through him raping her, the act that would leave enough evidence behind to put him on death row. She was alive when he pushed her face down in the mud as he tossed her things into the brush, her purse, her sandals, the glitter pens she had bought for her niece, and her wedding ring. Her assailant then wrapped her torn black sweater around her neck, twisted, and pulled. 3 minutes later, Lynn was dead. Although the investigation continued, no suspect was identified until 2003, when police investigated the murder of another woman in the Boise foothills. Erick Virgil Hall was questioned in connection with that murder and submitted a DNA sample. Hall's sample matched the DNA on the vaginal swabs collected from Miss Henneman's body 3 years earlier. Hall was subsequently charged with the kidnapping, rape, and murder of Lynn Henneman.
So sad.
It is so sad. They said that during the trial, the attorney paused everything for 3 whole minutes to show how long it would have taken her to die. Which I think is always so...
It's very powerful.
Very powerful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The helplessness, too, that her family must have felt being in a place that they weren't familiar with, that they didn't live here. And I was trying to think if I remembered this, and then I realized we were at college when this happened. At least when Lynn was killed. We were in Moscow. Because I don't remember this.
Mm-mm. No, I don't either. I mean, I do remember hearing about all the things that were happening on the Greenbelt, but I don't remember specifics.
Yes. Yeah, I feel like this stuff with the Greenbelt goes in like fits and spurts. Like we'll have many years of absolute safety on the Greenbelt, and then we'll have like a rash of craziness on the Greenbelt, and then,
it's quiet again.
Calm. Yeah. All right. We are going to talk about Miss Cheryl Hanlon now. Cheryl Hanlon was born March 23rd, 1959 in Seattle, Washington. She was an avid gardener. She loved the outdoors, especially camping. Her friend said she always put others before herself and was always the helping hand. She was a free spirit, and if you were her friend, you were her family. Cheryl was 43 years old when her path would cross with Erick Hall on the night of February 28, 2003. She had left her house after arguing with her partner of 17 years, Jeff Carlson. They had been out and started to argue on their way back home. And around 11 p.m., Cheryl said she was going back to the bars. This was the last time Jeff would see her alive. According to witness statements, Cheryl was seen walking downtown with a man and sitting outside the Cactus Bar around 2:45 a.m. Oh, the Cactus. And bars in Boise close at 2 a.m. The next person to see her was a man who lived at a campsite next to St. Michael's Church. He recognized the man that Cheryl was with as Erick Hall because Hall had also camped out there at certain times. The man said he overheard Hall telling Cheryl that he was cold and tired and that Cheryl offered to help him. After that, Hanlon and Hall walked toward the Boise foothills. From there, what we know is what police were able to piece together much later. At some point, there was a struggle. Erick Hall beat Cheryl and dragged her down an embankment where he raped her and then strangled her with her own belt. Cheryl's body was discovered by a 16-year-old boy who was walking his dog on March 1st of 2003. So this is 2 full days after she had left her home. She had been left near a children's play fort on 5th and Alturas Streets in North Boise. Police said she had been beaten so badly, it looked like she was the victim in a car crash. The witness, who had seen Cheryl with a man in downtown Boise the night before she was killed, saw the news and helped police do a composite sketch. And Erick Hall was arrested a short time later. He confessed to Boise police detectives that Cheryl had died while they were having rough sex on the hill, and he, quote, went too far with the belt around her neck. Fucking asshole. Detectives on the scene said they immediately saw similarities in the Henneman and Hanlon cases. Both women had been strangled with their own clothing, and both had been severely beaten and sexually assaulted. I hate him.
I hate him too, and I think it's just so eerie to think about. I mean, that's where we lived, that's where we played, that's where we walked.
Yeah.
It's just wild.
We used to walk all over the north end.
We used to walk those foothills, yeah.
And some of those foothills where we live, where my house was, I mean, my house was like up in the foothills. Yeah. And we used to walk behind Camel's Back Hill and into the gullies, and
yes,
all kinds of fucking creepers could have been back there and probably were back there, and we were totally oblivious.
Yeah. Yeah, we were dum-dums.
Total dum-dums.
All right, so we're going to talk about the trial now. So, during his trial in the Henneman murder, Hall's original lawyer, Emil Meishin, never tried to argue that his client wasn't at the scene of the crime. And his idiot client would proclaim that there was no way DNA could survive in a decomposing body in the water.
Because he's a scientist? Is he a scientist now? Erick Hall?
Well, what is even more idiotic is the fact that his own attorneys admitted that Erick had raped her. So why that would even be an issue to contest is known only to Mr. Hall. I mean, it doesn't, I mean, he's basically already said, it's so stupid. You can't reason with stupidity. Anyway.
But wait, I'm so confused. He says he admitted to the rape.
Yeah.
But said he didn't kill her?
Right. And he said that there was no way that DNA could survive being in the water.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Well, he's a smarty. I mean, clearly.
Yes, he's very, very bright, this man.
As to the murder, Meishin floated several theories. One was that Erick lost control and may have caused Lynn's death, but it wasn't premeditated. A lot was made of Hall's mental state during the trial. His sisters testified of abuse he and they had suffered at the hands of their older brother, Shannon, their father, and later one of his mom's boyfriends. They would testify that Erick was a loner with imaginary friends. He would wet the bed, and his mother would wave the soiled sheets out the window when the school bus dropped him off. Which is terrible and awful and psychotic, but choices, people. Choices. In 2004, Hall was convicted in the killing of Lynn Henneman. The jury decided he would face death. The 4th District Court jury was the first in the state to determine whether a convicted murderer should be executed. Which this is so interesting as we go through all of these cases and find out that before this case, a judge was the only person who could decide death sentences. Now they're turning all these over to the juries. It's just
Didn't we just...
Yes. We just
what case was it we were just talking about where they had to go through it again? Jeralee's parents.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
That's what's so crazy about all these. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anywho, until 2003, judges decided the sentence in capital murder cases. See? They're full circle. Hall's trial in the Hanlon slaying began in April of 2007, but was delayed during jury selection when the judge ruled that news coverage of the case, specifically a headline in the Idaho Statesman that mentioned Hall's previous murder conviction, made it too difficult to pick a jury in Ada County. Ultimately, the judge decided to keep the trial in Boise, but ordered that the jury would be picked in Gooding County and then bust the 100 miles each day for the duration of the trial. Hall's defense was that Cheryl had died during rough sex gone wrong. Jeff Carlson, Hanlon's boyfriend of 17 years at the time of her death, testified that he and Hanlon had a monogamous relationship, did not have rough sex during the 17 years they were together, and said she would not have consensual sex with a stranger. Not the Cheryl I know, Carlson testified.
In October of 2007, a second jury recommended that Erick Hall be put to death for the murder of Cheryl Ann Hanlon. Hall's attorney pleaded.
It's not telling me it's spelled wrong or wrong, which my computer tells me, but you say it how it feels good to you.
Hall's attorney begged the jury to give him life in prison instead of the death penalty, arguing that Hall was sexually, physically, and emotionally abused as a child and has mental health and drug addiction problems. Thankfully, the jury understood that he didn't kill these women because he'd had a rough childhood, or because he lived on the streets, or because he was on drugs. He killed them because, like so many other serial predators, he hates ladies. Some jurors struggled to keep from crying as the verdict was read, while Hall appeared unshaken. Cheryl's parents and relatives declined to talk in depth about the case, stating, quote, "We went through it once. We don't want to do it again." Hall became the first inmate in the state of Idaho to be sentenced to die for 2 unrelated murders. In fact, the jury decided that Hall's previous conviction of murder in the death of Lynn Henneman in 2004 was the deciding factor that earned Hall his second death sentence on Hanlon. And then the appeals began because this guy cannot keep his fucking trap shut for 5 minutes. One of the arguments his defense made was that his childhood of abuse had left him mentally handicapped. Now, not insane, but incompetent, nonetheless. Even as his lawyers have rotated in and out, he continues to file appeal after appeal. They've argued that prosecution prejudiced the jury by showing them a picture of Hall in a mugshot. They also claimed his attorney failed to adequately explore why Hoffert, who was the man in the pickup when Lynn was asking for directions, committed suicide the night after her death. And that his lawyer didn't spend enough time on showing how Hall's ex-girlfriends, now mind you, who'd testified that he was angry, he had a propensity for choking them, and that he would force them to have sex, had a long list of drug charges, and might have been compelled to give testimony against him for the state. For every single point made by the prosecution, Hall had a counterpoint. Well, luckily no one's believed his bullshit so far, and he will be kept alone in an 8 by 12-foot cell for 23 hours a day. He can leave the cell for 1 hour up to 5 times a week for exercise alone in a slightly larger cell. It could be years or even decades before his appeals are all exhausted. Hall was quoted as saying, "The long and the short of it is, I am going to either die in prison from old age or be murdered by way of lethal injection. That's my new reality. I only live to die." I think that if he is executed, that he should be strangled with his own pants.
Agree. I think that's an eye for an eye. If you've ever seen that Sally Fields movie. Just saying. Well, for real.
I love Sally Fields.
Well, who doesn't?
I don't get it.
You don't get murder?
I don't get murder, but you know what else is? I was reading about this guy, and this friend of his got interviewed by, I don't even remember who. It was one of the articles that I read, and he got interviewed, and he was saying how Erick was this very gentle guy, and that he was like a love everyone, and he would never hurt women, and he was just this, he was sort of messed up on drugs, but he would never do this. And then the reporter who's interviewing him was like, well, he admitted that he raped and accidentally killed this woman with a belt. And he was like, oh, well, maybe he did that one, but if he had been involved with the other one, he would have disappeared the body. That's what he said.
Yeah, exactly. Why didn't he disappear that body, idiot?
He would have disappeared the body. Shut up. Shut up. And I've said it before, and I will say it again. Being on drugs does not make you a rapist and a murderer, okay?
Oh,
That is
hey.
some sick shit in your head that has nothing to do with addiction. So there.
Preach. This is from the Church of Whitney, Rivera. Preach, sister.
Gross.
Yeah.
And we did look for more information because we do like to give you guys the history and the background on these criminals. And there's just not really anything, with the exception of like the testimony of his siblings that he was abused.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
There's just not anything that is around. So.
And probably a lot of that has to do with the fact that he was a transient and homeless, although he declares he was not. But.
Yeah. I wonder how he got his hair so clean cut on the streets.
Well, you don't know what Grant had going on in that little halfway house he had set up. Maybe somebody came in and was giving him cuts.
Maybe Grant gave them haircuts.
Yeah, maybe Grant did. Seemed like a nice guy.
Yeah.
Let's do our Idaho.
Okay.
So, this Idaho is going back to the article that John Barry wrote about Erick Virgil Hall in their sort of pen pal letters back and forth to each other. So it says that Barry did not ask if any of these women were the ex-girlfriends of Hall, who testified at his trial, claiming that he would fly into a violent rage and choke them when he got angry. He did, however, ask about the women he claims still love him. Erick explained that he doesn't actually get letters or visits from them, but that he's happier that way, because if they did come, it would make him feel like he was in one of those convalescent homes where older people are left to the will of those nasty people that abuse them. They can't go home either. It's sad, he said. Alrighty. Well, what? So, people love me, but they don't talk about it, or write about it, or come
and
visit
they
me.
think that I am the greatest, but they also like to tell people that I choke them out during sex and force them to do stuff that they don't want to do. But they love me.
Love. And they're normal. I love how he had to put that. Normal women love me.
Yes.
Okay,
I
sir.
have very many normal women that love me. Do ya?
Doesn't track, Erick. In April 2019, John Barry was contacted by one of Erick's attorneys, John Horwitz. They arranged to meet for coffee to discuss his case. When they met, Horwitz asked Barry not to talk to Erick about the case anymore. He told him that Erick really needs a friend, not to relive the horrors of 20 years ago. Horwitz asked him if he was Erick's friend. Barry said he couldn't lie. Barry replied, quote, "No, he is not my friend." John Barry has since been blocked from contacting Erick Virgil Hall through emails. That article was super interesting. The whole thing.
It was really interesting. We should link it in the show notes because it was super interesting. And
well, yeah, the coincidences of how their lives overlapped. And, I mean, not really that much different from Lynn Henneman taking one of her coworkers' shifts and ending up where she ended up. It's just, life is so wild and weird.
Well, and you always hear these stories of people like having this intuitive feeling about things and sort of pushing it aside. And we all do that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm just being silly. You know?
You gotta listen to your gut, man.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
is Table Rock still there, the restaurant?
No.
No, it's not.
No, it hasn't been there for a while.
Because I'm intrigued by that salad now. They talked about it a lot. Which is why I made sure
I
it
did
was
read
in
a
the
lot
story,
about the
because
salad.
they talked about this salad.
Yeah, I never had that salad there.
No, I
Actually,
didn't
don't
either.
remember what I used to get. I remember what my mom used to get. My mother used to always get the bangers and mash at Table
That is
Rock.
so weird, Nancy.
Every single time.
That doesn't sound great. Also, I don't like the name.
I think the only thing I like about it is the name. Because it's
I think the only thing I like about it
very
is the
British.
mash. Potato.
You like a sauce. You like a sausage.
No,
You do.
I No, I don't.
One of the things that we have bonded over in our lives is a shared love of a sausage. And I'm not being dirty. I'm being breakfast meat related conversation.
First of all, let's be clear. Whitney is obsessed with breakfast meats, but second of all, no, a bangers and mash is not a breakfast sausage, and it is also not a chorizo sausage, which is the only kind of sausage I really enjoy.
Well, what is it then?
Chorizo. It's like one of those German sausage concoction. I don't know. I don't like them. My husband likes to boil my beer and tell me I'm going to like it. I never do. One time, you guys, when I asked Whitney what her favorite food was, she said, breakfast meats.
Breakfast meats. And you know what's really funny is that I almost never eat animal.
I know.
I just, Whitney, as I've gotten older, I just dislike them less and less and less.
Whitney,
what?
The breakfast meats are calling you. They miss you.
Yes, I'm telling you. Even when I am almost exclusively plant-based, and not because I'm a hippie, it's because it makes me feel better. I still cannot deny a breakfast meat. But actually, that's not true because I won't eat like ham.
Oh, well, nobody likes ham.
Some people like ham.
It smells bad when they put it in breakfast. No.
Yeah.
No.
No, just exclusively bacon and sausage. Breakfast
and Whitney
meats.
likes it.
Let me be clear.
Crispy sausage.
And crispy bacon.
Yeah. Are you hungry for sausage now? Don't lie.
Yeah, I could always eat sausage. And you know what's funny is Poppy doesn't really like meat either. She's not a big meat eater, my kid. But she will pack away a breakfast meat.
Because there's delicious, salty, fatty foods.
Good. So good.
This has been quite the tangent.
So guys, quick announcement before we close it out. We are opening up the polls for our very special 25th episode, and we are letting our patrons vote on what they would like to hear. So if you would like to have a say in the story we tell for our 25th episode that will be coming up in a few weeks, head over to Patreon and get signed up, and you can give us a vote. We have 3 different options up there, and I'm excited to see what you guys pick. There's a front runner already that I saw today.
One? Tell me which one it is.
So the options for the 25th episode are The Life and Crimes of Joseph Edward Duncan, The Disappearance of Stephanie Crane, and the Murder of Cassie Jo Stoddart. And Stephanie Crane is in the lead.
Ooh, interesting, actually.
Yeah.
All right, we'll sign up. So that is the story of the handsome on the outside, disgusting
Scallywag
on the inside, Erick Virgil Hall, and the 2 lovely women whose lives he took, Lynn and Cheryl. We hope you enjoyed hanging out with us today.
If you did, please give us a like and a follow wherever you listen to podcasts. If you would like to become a patron, you can find the link in the show notes. It says support the show. It will take you to Patreon, and you can see all of the cool bonus content you get every month when you are a patron. And if you would like to sponsor the show, you can reach us at ghostsandgarnets@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much for listening. We will see you next week.
Peace out.